The name Edgeplay is the business name, and it was started as a business purely to deal with the edgier side of play. So that's where the name came from. And that's just kind of stuck with the needle play and the branding and all the rest of it. The Impact Toys name, again, came from the business of making impact toys, the whips and the floggers. So that was the inspiration for the two names. My own personal name is a very long story, the T5 Tart. It was an ex-girlfriend who basically dumped me because I was too much of a tart and I loved my car too much, which was a Volvo T5. And that name was basically made as a joke about 12 years ago and has stuck ever since then. 3 adjectives, that's difficult. Measured. I think everything has to be done within parameters, and everything has to be very measured and very controlled. Intense. I think a lot of people would say my play is quite intense. And no, I'm stuck for a third one. Really am. My best quality, patience, I think. I'm very patient with people, especially people who want to learn, want to pick your brains. I'll explain things in very simple ways. My worst flaw is I never forget. I never forget those that have done me wrong. I may forgive, but I'll never ever forget what they've done. I've always maintained that the two are very separate. BDSM, for me, being a sadist, is not sexual. Sex is a totally different thing for me. The two do come together sometimes if you're in an intimate relationship with someone, but for me, I can play BDSM, SM, any dynamic you want with someone without it being sexual at all. I can then go and have a sexual relationship with someone that's got nothing to do with kink or BDSM. You can't associate it with one dish. It can't be done. It's a buffet. I want a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of this, and I don't want that today, but I'll have some of that instead. There's so many facets to it. You can't put it into, it's a lasagna or it's a stroganoff. It's so many things that you just pick and mix. When there's music playing, especially if it's something like rock or metal, you get into the beat of the music, so it almost takes over the scene. I prefer the music, the noises of the people, the sound of the whip, the sound of the flogger, the sound of the breathing. I prefer it to, if there is music, I prefer it to be very, very quiet, very, very background. Tolerance, acceptance, that not one size fits all, that people have different ways of dealing with things and viewing things, and that there isn't a right and wrong way. There's just your way of doing it. It's a double-edged sword. Going back to when I first started, you had to know somebody, you were schooled by somebody, you were mentored, you learnt the rules, you learnt the etiquettes and the protocols. And until you learnt those rules, etiquettes and protocols, you were very much sidelined, on the sideline. Now, with the legitimisation of BDSM, you get all sorts of people coming to clubs. And they don't necessarily know the protocols and the rules, which can cause problems. It's not a bad thing. You can now pretty much openly talk about BDSM in any situation, and people don't instantly go, freak. Films like Secretary, 50 Shades of Grey, Preaching to the Perverted, all these types of films have helped bring it into the mainstream culture. But there are a lot of people that think it's an easy way to get laid, which it really isn't. It's not a race. Don't rush in and try and learn everything and do everything in the first 6 months. Take your time, enjoy it, listen to people, watch people, learn from people. you're never going to walk into it knowing it all. You might think you know it all, but I've been doing this the best part of 30 years, and I will still go to a workshop and I'll still learn something. And surprisingly enough, I'll learn something from someone who's been doing it 2 or 3 years. I think just from somebody's individuality, just the individual way that I do something, my own style, whether somebody's 2 weeks in, 20 years in, they're going to pick up something. And I think that's true of everybody that goes and does workshops. Because they're an individual, because they have their way of doing it, you will always learn a different angle in some respect. One of the funniest episodes was we were out doing a photo shoot, and we were just wrapping up, and there'd been rope and there'd been a bit of blood play and all sorts of things. And this young farmer came round the corner and saw us packing up ropes and whatnot, stopped, came over, picked up one of my whips and just started cracking this whip like he'd always had a whip in his hand. And he'd got absolutely no clue what we were up to, but we sat there talking for about half an hour, and the next thing he was going to a workshop and going to clubs and all this sort of thing. That was quite an interesting episode. We all learn, and we all have to learn somewhere. We all have to learn techniques and safety, and we have to learn what we're doing. Nobody is going to pick up, I say nobody, very few people will pick up an implement, a flogger, a paddle, a whip, and be able to use it competently from the first time they pick it up. Somebody has to show them, has to teach them, and they have to be receptive to learning. So I think it's very important. Knowledge. I think the sharing of knowledge is the legacy we leave behind. And if you can enrich one person's play experience from the whole conference, it's made the conference worthwhile. I think that the reason people should go to the workshops is because they want to learn and they want to see a different way of doing something. They want to participate, they want to pick up a whip and use it and be able to competently use it when they go home. Not having been able to do that beforehand, that gives me a great sense of satisfaction. For me, it's all about the enhancement of people's play. And what I do in my workshops is I want people to be able to take something away from that they will use for the rest of their life. Why would they follow me? I don't know. I just do what I do, and I like sharing that knowledge. I've recently got very involved in the LGBT side of things, doing a lot of promotion of LGBT issues and rights through my Facebook pages and various other formats. I think that there is a lot of political debate going on at the moment, which I try not to get too involved in. But you have to support gender equality, you have to support the rights of the trans community, the whole LGBT community, and you have to try and support that in any way that you can. And I think bringing awareness to what happens is the start of the change of acceptance and tolerance. And I think that is the way forward with education, that these people aren't something different, they're just people, and they should be treated as such. I think Vlad the Impaler. I don't know why, he's just such a sadistic freak that I want to know how his brain ticked. I want to know what made his brain work in such an outlandish, sadistic fashion. I don't think there's one particular discipline that I'd like to. With the exception of maybe rope, I've never really learned about ropes. I think it's something that I might get more interested in. But I think every workshop you go to, you learn something. Whether it's a discipline you're particularly interested in or something you think you know a lot about, you'll always find another angle and another little piece of information, a little light bulb moment going, that's what I'm missing. And I think whatever workshop you go to, you'll always pick something up. In 10 years, I will probably be sat at a vice, plaiting whips the same as I do now, and probably coming to Rome and teaching people to use them, and still doing what I've done for the last nearly 30 years. Having a lot of fun playing with people and sharing the knowledge that I've accrued over that time. I can't see anything I really want to change that much from what I do now to what I want to do in 10 years' time.